Welcome to another season of Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe meet to empower you to succeed. This program is brought to you by Right Career Fit. Listen and learn, and remember to have that very important career conversation with a career professional. Today's episode is a bit different since I'm honored to be joined by two special guests instead of one. They are Mark Franklin and Rich Feller, and they have been collaborating together for many years. They will be talking to us about the value of self-knowledge, or as they like to call it, who you are matters. Both Mark Franklin and Rich Feller have been amazing supporters of my mission to increase career literacy, and are second-time guests on Hoda's Career Info. Feel free to check out episode 11 of season 1 and episode 26 of season 2 of Hoda's Career Info for a more detailed understanding of their work. Mark Franklin and Rich Feller, thank you so much for joining me again. I'm looking forward to the discussion. You know, the reason I invited you is because I love career conversations and I believe in the value of stories to uncover career direction. So let's get it started. You are the experts, and particularly with the tool Conversations Matter, a supportive and fun virtual tool that promises to help users move forward. So my first question to you is, why do conversations matter? And Mark, do you want to lead this answer to this question?
Sure, Hoda, and thanks so much for having Rich and I be on the recording today. I really appreciate sharing these perspectives and the career literacy work that you're doing. And you know, conversations really matter when it comes to career development or thinking about what's next for you. People often think about that on their own, and they often struggle trying to figure it out by themselves. And yet when you engage in a conversation, either with a career professional or with peers, and have some structure around that conversation, it really helps people to articulate their skills and strengths and what matters to them at this age and stage, and connecting the dots between all those elements and future possibilities, whether you're a student graduating or a mid-career professional or even in retirement. What am I going to do next? So many people are asking about that, and organized, structured, evidence-based conversations really help people figure out what next.
Yeah, Mark, it's just always so helpful to hear you talk, because you use the key words that I think really define our thinking, and also the elements both in Conversations Matters and Who You Are Matters. To me, everyone is trying to navigate a lifetime of transitions, and boy, conversations may come from individual service or with family around coffee. And in this case, we try to think about how to build a structure with safety that might make that possible.
And with your responses in mind, you created Conversations Matter. How does Conversations Matter work?
Well, I can start, and you know, it's interesting about that name, even Conversations Matter, because it came about at the beginning of the pandemic. Prior to that, Rich and I were working on this game called Who You Are Matters, and it was a board game, and we can talk more about how that works. But it was face-to-face. It would have 4 people sitting around a game table, and it was scalable. You could have hundreds of people playing at once. Then the pandemic came, and everybody needed to pivot and figure out what to do. So Rich and I scrambled to say, if people cannot sit around a table face-to-face anymore, speaking and breathing and everything, then what are we going to do? How can we make a virtual variation of this game that's effective? And like everybody, we pivoted and worked fast and iterated over a number of different designs and models, and came up with a virtual variation that we called Conversations Matter. So it's really like the Who You Are Matters game, but virtually delivered. But what was amazing right away, when so many people were feeling isolated, we had a chance to connect, reflect, and engage. And we would have breakout rooms, you know, instead of sitting around a table of 4, we would have a breakout room of 4 people, usually on Zoom, but it would work on any platform. And you could again have hundreds of people in these breakouts. And it would mimic this experience that people would have in the game, where you would pick, for instance, a personal quality like creative or curious or big picture thinker, and everybody would share why they chose it. And, you know, in a micro narrative, 30-second micro narrative, you can share a lot about why I chose big picture thinker. And there's this beautiful experience then of people giving each other appreciation. So you would pick one person to appreciate, for instance, and say, Hoda, I appreciated what you said about being creative because, you know, I really see how you manifest that in this podcast and all the things that you're doing. And as much as it was great in person, when we were feeling so isolated throughout the pandemic, that experience of connecting and appreciating one another through Conversations Matter really seemed to strike a chord and make a difference. And so we went on and developed a whole bunch of different versions of it, Rich, that maybe you can talk about too.
Yeah, when you think about what COVID did to us, really, it took away a chance to get feedback, to see people's faces, to feel a sense of loneliness, to struggle with how do I get connected with people. With the power of Zoom, which is what we used, and then the structure again, that was always based upon high structure and high safety, it allowed people to get some amazing feedback, for it allowed them to reflect on stories, to be able to gain empathy, and to frankly, I think, expand their ability to learn about emotional intelligence. And I was just awestruck by how open people came once they got through any sense of awkwardness. And at the same time in COVID, we were all feeling very awkward. How do I use Zoom? How do I learn technology? How do I show up? And people wanted to see faces. It was just so delightful to see that. And I think Conversations allowed that to happen. And it really took off like wildfire. It went all over the world. And we have, I think, 19 countries involved in playing it. So we were saying, what's the need? And we felt the need to see faces like we're seeing right now. And that's where it came from.
So my understanding then is the Who You Are Matter started first, and then the Conversations Matter came afterwards. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Who You Are Matters, and then we go back to then to Conversations Matter?
It probably makes sense to do that, Hoda, because that's where it came from, you know, and we learned a lot as we evolved to online. But I'll share with people through the screen share.
Mark, I'll let you take over and talk a little bit.
All right, so what we've got there is our Firekeepers stick. And what was great about that tool, it's just a simple piece of technology. It's really a toy, but it does two things for the Who You Are Matters game. One, it becomes like a talking stick, and it democratizes conversation. It makes everybody both participate and participate equally. So nobody dominates the conversation, nobody hangs back. And it also serves as a timer, a very gentle timer without a buzzer.
So the stick is passing, sorry, the stick is passing from one
person to another. So if you picture 4 or 5 people sitting around a table, and each person would go. So for instance, the example I gave before, big picture thinker, that was one of the personal qualities. So I'll just share the screen here, and I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. So if you look at this guidebook here, you'll see the personal qualities, and people would choose among cards. There would be 12 cards, and personal qualities would be something like logical or big picture thinker or creative. And so each person would take a turn to finish the round and say, I chose it because. So for instance, I might say, I'm a big picture thinker. Rich, give me the timer on that, and we'll see if we can time that and just give a little demo. I chose big picture thinker because I love looking at work from high level, you know, like when you're flying in an airplane and you can look down and see the pattern of rivers and lakes and mountains and ridges. And that's how I look at my work. I really like that kind of interconnected thinking, big picture thinking. I just don't like the details. So I love working with people who are more detail oriented. And look,
way less than 15 seconds, Mark. And look what we learned about him. Hoda, look what we learned about Mark just by that simple micro narrative story. And it might be my turn, so I then turn it over again. It's not meant to be a totally accurate measure, but it reminds us to be using it 15 to 30 seconds. In addition, we all focus on Mark's story because he's holding the stick. He has the floor.
So people would share those micro narratives, and then we would have a second round where you would have a chance to appreciate one other participant. And again, using that talking stick, or we called it the Firekeeper stick, to make everybody feel included, right? It's such an inclusive activity because of that simple stick. And everybody feels, whether you have, like I've had students playing with their professors, and I've had individual contributors and managers and directors all playing together. And it just evens the playing field, levels the playing field. It makes everybody feel included. And as they go through it, guess what? They have a career development experience. They talk about their personal qualities, strengths, and desires, another word for values, what's important to you, influences of others, other people, assets, what you bring, and interests. And all of that helps us then generate relevant possibilities, and they build a possibility for their future based on what they've learned about themselves. And then they are able to share that possibility in detail with their peers and get really supportive feedback for moving forward. So when they leave the event, they feel like, wow, I had this very inclusive experience. I built some communication skills, emotional intelligence. I developed my career a little bit further. And we have them take one small step, one small action that you see here, an inspired action to explore that possibility a tiny bit further, so that they feel like they've got something to do immediately when they walk out. And this was lovely when you could sit in a group of 4 or 5 people. I think our biggest event ever, Rich, was something like 300 people, if you can picture that, each in groups of 4 or 5. Each with a game kit in front of them, something that was unimaginable during COVID though. So we'll get to the story of that, but that's the game, right? It was like, how can you have career development happen in a fun way, in a very peer-to-peer driven way, using stories and narrative, so that people feel like they had a great experience and they have something when they leave, right? This clarification sketch that you see here on the screen share, and a small action to get them started, and connections with the people around the table to maybe help them be kind of capability partners to get that action done.
So I do have a couple questions, unless you have something to add, Rich, before I ask my question.
No, I just think Mark describes it so well. And remember, this is built upon a whole sense of positivity. There's not a negative word in the whole game. It includes all the ingredients of what the research says that is built into a critical ingredients of effective career intervention. So I think we thought a lot about the science of how career development works, the value of positivity, the empowerment of an affirmation, taking out negativity. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's a way for me to tell a story, reflecting deeply about my experience in a very safe community. And I think that's why it was so successful. I remember 150 people sitting in Washington, D.C., 25 tables, and I was at the podium. And the game went so well because once you do the first round, it self-directs itself. In the videotape here, you can see we captured a bunch of workers in a company, and they talk about what it meant to them. You can see them being highly engaged. So the video there also tells the story nicely.
So my questions are probably simple questions, but so as people talk about their stories or their ideal person, they are definitely going through a process of reflection. But do they have to write the notes, like to fill in the cards as they're talking, or who does that for them?
Yeah, so here, it's interesting that you asked that, Hoda, because in the game experience, when we were sitting there, Rich is holding a guidebook, if you can see it. So this guidebook was a nice document that folds in half, and each participant would have a guidebook. And when I'll just use this image here, you'll notice, and if people are just listening, imagine a game board, just like any game board that folds in, it's called a quad fold board, but it folds in quarters. And you'll see that there were places to put cards. So when the player lands on one of our dots, let's say that green personal qualities dot, they would pick up these 12 personal qualities cards, put them on the game board face up so everybody could read all 12 of the personal qualities. And each person would take a moment to reflect on which ones best describe them, and they would choose 3 to write in. So it was just one word, like writing like logical or creative or big picture thinker. It's like 3 words, but like one word. And you would just write those 3 in. So it would just take a moment, and then comes the sharing using that talking stick, the firekeeper stick, and the appreciation. And then you would move on to the next set of cards. So they would move the game piece to strengths, and you would then reflect on your skills or strengths that you like to use. Our definition of strengths was a skill or knowledge area that you really like to use, instead of something that you might have that you don't like as much, but let's call that an asset. So each one of these elements anybody in career development would recognize these elements as something really important to look at when having a career conversation. However, we put it together in this really unique way and an engaging and holistic, I should say, experience, so that unlike a lot of other assessments that focus only on personality like MBTI, or only on strengths like StrengthsFinder, this kind of gives you that holistic picture all at once. And it sends a kind of subliminal message that career development is all these elements combined, and not just to overly focus on one of them. Like interests, we know that say the strong interest inventory or other interest inventories have been used for so long. And Rich, you can say more about it, but interests can actually steer us away from the economy.
Yeah, I mean, interests really are a snapshot at the time, and in a way create kind of a form of tracking only about your past experiences. What did you know? And if your life is limited, you don't have a lot to choose from. So we knew we had to go beyond interest, because in a lot of ways, there's an exposure bias. So by integrating interest, which is important, we want to pull on many other variables, as you can see by this list here, because we're really creating kind of a simulated coaching session.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree. I love that it goes beyond the interests, and it focuses on different variants. One more question about it, and because I work with young people who are always hesitant to talk about themselves, how has your experience, and perhaps some adults are, I know I would be one of these people if sitting around a table and you're expecting me to share something. How has the reaction been? How do you prompt people to move beyond that?
Well, I would just say that in our pilot testing, I remember taking it to a school in ninth graders in Boulder, Colorado, actually. And it was amazing. I found that the range of ability to both tell a story and to listen and to give feedback was the same range of abilities that I found when I did it with 50 plus people. So at the high school level, we noticed in some cases people were reticent, peer pressure may be a little different. And there was even a little concern about people not being able to give positive feedback. So we had to pay attention to that and tell high school leaders who do this, be aware, you might want to teach people about using the stick, to listen deeply, to be reflective, to tell a story. On the other extreme, when I did it with a recent group at a library with 50 plus individuals, many of them couldn't hear well. So you had that issue. So I would say that's why honoring individual differences are critical, and it's less about age and really knowing your audience. And frankly, most people would love to have a stick in their hand because everybody listens to somebody who owns the floor. And if we tell stories that are limited to 15 to 30 seconds, it is quite remarkable how much you can learn from a person. So after doing the first round, the normative behavior says, wow, I know how to do this. I listen deeply. I take 15 seconds, and I want to be able to give feedback if I listen well. Mark has done a nice job of giving us language. We have storytellers, but we also need story listeners. And those are behaviors we want to build in all people from ninth grade to gray.
Do you have anything else to add, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I've just seen such a range of people participate in this experience. I love that expression, Rich. I haven't heard it right from ninth grade to grave. And, you know, college and university students in particular, we've seen right from first year undergrads to grad students, international students who may not have English as a first language, mature students. And across the board, you know, most people have this very positive reaction to a game. And if they walk into a room and these game boards are all set up, most people say, wow, this looks kind of fun. Some people have negative associations with games. Maybe their big brother used to always beat them in Monopoly or something. You know, but what we've discovered, this isn't normally, like, it's not like a competitive game, of course, it's a non-competitive game. Some people use the phrase serious games because it's got a pro-social kind of objective and target. But really, it's the structure, right? Rich mentioned it. Even for people who find that games aren't like, oh, I'm not a game player, but it's not a regular game. It's more of a participatory activity. And it's not like, oh no, I'm going to have to like do improv or something. The high structure, we tell them exactly what to say, right? There's a little prompt. I chose big picture because, and they only have to fill in the blank in 15 to 30 seconds, or I appreciate what you said, Hoda, because. And because the high structure and the time limited amount of participation, it just makes it easy for everybody. And even the reticent ones, even the ones, maybe younger players like those ninth graders Rich was talking about, or people who might not see themselves as game players, or even I've done this, like I have a first career in engineering and I went and used this in an industrial manufacturing facility with a big group of engineers and other manufacturing workers. And, you know, it was like, what, we're going to do a game? But you know what? It worked equally well with them because of the structure, because as soon as you come in, the facilitator says, here's what we're going to do, everybody. And they just get started with it and they find it remarkably disarming, and then they're in it. And then they say, like Rich, you've used the phrase, it's like a 2-day retreat in 2 hours. You know, they just have this experience that they love, and they just did not anticipate or expect that, but they walked out feeling like, wow, that was great.
Hoda, 2 stories I can tell. I just recently did an Estes Park, Colorado, with a bunch of principals. Principals came back to a retreat, and it took them to such a deep level starting the retreat. It was amazing how that accelerated their ability to self-disclose, to be honest, to be attentive. And we watched what happened throughout the retreat. It was accelerated tenfold. Second story I tell is about, I've used it with 3 different family groups. And I remember being with my own family and getting feedback from someone about one of my family members that had never been said before. It was so powerful. It was tearful. I remember another family that was going through a loss, and there were sisters and brothers in it. And it went on actually for over 2 hours because I let it go. They actually said to me, it was better than the therapy they had received, because as a family, they talked about issues and said things to each other that they never had said before because there wasn't the structure. And once you create safety, psychological safety, and provide a structure to tell stories, and then give affirmation from those stories about how it affects an individual, it accelerates the process tremendously well.
This is very helpful, particularly as I think about it and with your explanations. And now my question to you, whether for career coaches, counselors, high school educators, or even for myself, as I'm sometimes invited to do a 6-week course. So if I were to start with Who You Are Matters or Conversation Matter, the virtual or the in-person version, how can I build on my 6-week course from when you're suggesting like it's a 2-day retreat, right? So how can I continue to build my course if I want to do like a curriculum design for a certain course? How can I build on that?
Well, there are 2 examples I have, and Mark has other ones, but I teach a coach training program virtually around the world. And we do the Conversation Matter virtual experience because we're actually virtual. So we plug that into our curriculum, take about 90 minutes and everyone experiences it. Then they also get a game to play, because once you've experienced it, I think you know how to normally understand it. And the game is so simple. There's really only 5 steps you repeat. They can then play it themselves with their own clients. The other thing we do is the face-to-face training. We actually play the game, and we play it so they can learn it, because once you've played it, you can then go lead other groups with it. So that's how I've plugged it into my own virtual and face-to-face coach training.
And we've plugged it into countless programs now. And it's all, we should back up a tiny bit and just say that this is really based on a narrative framework. We've been calling it the heroic G narrative framework. And I'll just share that for listeners. I'm kind of guided by this big picture framework or roadmap that we sometimes use as a word. And it begins with people's questions like, what am I going to do next? I'm going to graduate, or I'm retiring. What do I do next? And they want to make good choices that they feel positive about into the future, which is shown here as life and career cycles of stability and change. And we can think 2 or 3 steps into the future. And the framework really has people take 1 step back into this reflection and clarification, which can be the Who You Are Matters game or the Conversations Matter virtual, or a narrative reflective practice that we do one-on-one. It helps people see those patterns that come out of a reflection and generate future possibilities that are very aligned with who they are. And when they prioritize, let's say you come up with 6 great ideas and you want to move forward with 3 of them, how can you then intentionally explore those ideas? And we've come up with some helpful language here to help people watch for clues. You know, it's a reframe of labor market information, clues about why that might be a good fit and what you know about it. Take small steps, take inspired action, help overcome procrastination. And then be open to the serendipitous, the happenstance moments that come. And this vortex of intentional exploration leads people to make great choices. And we've implemented this not only with the game Who You Are Matters and the Conversations Matter virtual, but a process of narrative assessment that has both a program and a platform. And we've applied this. I teach a career course to graduate students at the University of Toronto. We've implemented it in non-academic career exploration for grad students, PhDs, and postdocs. We've implemented it for military spouses. The Canadian military, the spouse of serving members, often has a career disruption because they're redeployed across Canada or the US or Europe. And so we've done a kind of career clarification process for military spouses. During the pandemic, we did a number of things for arts and entertainment workers hard hit by the pandemic, and most recently with the US State Department for people who are retiring from the Foreign Service as diplomats and trying to think, what am I going to do next? And for all of them, we've gone from using that, either the game that I shared before, this is the guidebook, or you'll notice here, this is the kind of, we call it a connection guide for the virtual experience. Things change a little bit because it's virtual, but we still have those same 3 personal qualities, strengths, desires, and possibilities. And it all comes together in this really nice clarification statement. But Hoda, to answer your question about, where can you go next as a participant? You might say, wow, that was nice. I had a great experience for an hour or 2 hours. But we've developed a platform that we call Online Storyteller. And from this experience, they can then go to this narrative assessment platform. And I sometimes use this picture here. After the Who You Are Matters experience, this narrative assessment platform lets you on your own reflect on stories or experiences, jobs, volunteer activities, what you did in your summer if you're a student, and gather and organize in those same elements, right? The same personal qualities, strengths, and desires. And you learn as you reflect on stories how these elements start to form a pattern so that you can generate meaningful possibilities. And we bring people back then for an intentional exploration workshop to help them figure out, how do I then explore these possibilities? And we have thousands of helping professionals, career professionals then, who might add their own personalization, one-on-one meetings or workplace workshops. For instance, how to have career conversations in the workplace, or employment offerings, like how to improve your LinkedIn profile or resume. And all of that came from this Heroic G framework, which is just, it's an acronym there, and I'll just finish with this. HERO is psychological capital. It's a combination of hope, efficacy or confidence, resilience to bounce back from setbacks, and optimism. And then we attach that with I for intentional exploration, C for clarity and curiosity, and the G is for the growth mindset. Rich, do you want to say a bit? Because you've really coined that Heroic G framework language.
Well, I think we always want to give credit to people who have taught us, and I think we value Lofton's work about psychological capital, which is where hope came from. And then when you look at this map, you right away see the 2 words, intentional exploration and clarification. So we added the I and the C. And Carol Dweck's work, which has helped all of us think about moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, frees all of us up to say, what are my possibilities? What's next for me? I can grow. So Heroic G is built into this model. And we think that's allowed us to say we really can make a difference and have some outcome studies to show, even in one session, how we can change scores on some of these variables. And I think that's what's really critical. I mean, just yesterday, we got a call about someone using this with 40 resident assistants at a college to open up their campus. We have another campus who does this with many, many students each semester. And what we'd like to say is that we've been able to take a model, build 2 solutions, being a virtual game and a face-to-face game, and then build a platform which really helps the counselor working with the client collect their data with the power of what machine learning and other things are teaching us, so we can engage this process over time. And then if you add video to this, we can let people go through 12 steps by themselves to do this platform by themselves. So while I think your conversations today around Conversations Matter and Who You Are Matters are solutions, we've built a whole platform, a theory, and then a way to help all counselors reach many more people, because we know we need to get deeper impact at a lower cost and more scale. And that's what these tools try to do.
And my final question to you, like, I really like the tool. I love it. And I think it really simplifies things for career coaches and counselors. My question is, how do we go about signing up? So do we sign up a product by product, or do we get an access to the platform by signing up to one of them? Just a little bit of details on that, please.
Well, you can see on the screen here, if you look under the button register, we offer periodic Conversations Matters tasters where you can play Conversations Matters for free with us so that you can experience it. And we think that's a critical way to really get the experience first. And then we have a series of opportunities for you to take additional training at the beginning level, to play the game, to understand virtual events, how we can help you do a better job of understanding the whole platform. So I would say sign up for the free gameplay virtually. Anybody can do that any place in the world. And then think about what other options might help you. I think this started from what Mark said. We had a game, but then we saw what COVID did, and we tried to give this away to the world to serve people. And that's where Conversations Matters comes. And we still offer this free to people online to try that. So as you see the screen here, sign up if you want to. And I think that's a good taster. Mark, your trainings also, do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, lots of ways to start. That free event is 90 minutes at the onelifetools.com site is a good way to start. And you can have an experience of Conversations Matter, the game experience that we developed virtually. I actually had a session just last night. Lucy and I led a session for the Tech Stewardship Program where career management is embedded. And I popped into one breakout room and we had somebody from Vancouver, somebody from Calgary, somebody from Toronto, somebody from St. John's, Newfoundland, and somebody from Jakarta, Indonesia was part of that too, because that tech stewardship is reaching all over the place. And imagine, like, just the ability to cross borders. During the pandemic, the border between Canada and the US was largely closed, and yet we could still connect and gather across the COVID problems and connect with one another through that medium, which was really amazing. So now we have these two things thanks to the pandemic, and we've been busily training people. Of course, during the pandemic, nobody wanted to train on the game, the physical game, because we weren't using it. So we invented the Who You Are Matters virtual. That's Conversations Matter. So we invented not only, first of all, the experience, but then the facilitator training. So people can easily learn that half a day. It's on the training link there. It's lots of fun. We do an abridged version of the experience so that if you haven't even experienced it, you can have a brief 45 or 50-minute experience. And then we teach people how to facilitate it so they can lead it with their groups. And then when people want to learn more about the self-directed narrative assessment, the thing that you can do, whether it's the game or the Conversations Matter, if you want to deepen that experience and follow up, you can learn how that works in a one-day storyteller training. And now we have a lot of people who do what my team here at Career Cycles does, is we do narrative career counseling. And to learn that, we've created a professional certification that's 3 days. So it's much deeper. And it takes you into not only how does this narrative framework work, but how can you use it one-on-one with clients live in session using that clarification sketch, and then be able to integrate it into other programs. And we call that the HNCP, or Holistic Narrative Career Professional Certification. If people want to learn the game is now so easy to learn. We do have the training, but we've created a series of videos and a really nice facilitator guide to make it really easy to learn, so they can join us to participate in training, or they can just get access to a bunch of videos and pick up a box and utilize these tools. There's a few YouTubes here and a really nice facilitator's guide that has a kind of script if you want to follow it, to get people easily learning what you need to do to facilitate this. So that's all on the One Life Tools wellbeing.com site under the training link, and that's a good way to get started.
I want to congratulate you on the transition to the virtual world. A lot of companies I know couldn't handle that. And that was great that you were able to come up with a new tool altogether through that time. So these were all the questions I had for you today, both Mark and Rich. Thank you so much for your time. Did you want to add one more thing before we wrap up the episode?
Well, Hoda, I just want to take the talking stick and take 15 seconds to say I'm so grateful and really appreciate your opportunity to let us share our message, but also to learn with you. And we appreciate the great work you're doing as well. So thank you for being concerned about Conversations Matter and who you are matters. And thank you again for this opportunity. Mark, great always to talk to you as well.
Pass the stick, Rich, to me through the webcam there. This is what we were doing during the pandemic. You can pass the stick through the webcam, and then the person can pick it up and have their stick in hand. So Hoda, thanks so much for not only this interview here about Who You Are Matters and Conversations Matter, but I want to let listeners know also that you have been collaborating here on the Career Buzz podcast. And we've been sharing these really great career stories and stories of career professionals and your focus on career literacy. And so people can subscribe to Career Buzz. I'm one of the hosts. Stephen Armstrong is a host, and Hoda is a host. Since like about 6 months ago or whatever it was. And you've been doing some great interviews, and we've had them now on the Career Buzz podcast. So please subscribe and rate those podcasts. And thank you for this opportunity.
You've been listening to Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. My guests today on Hoda's Career Info are Dr. Rich Feller and Mark Franklin. Dr. Rich Feller, LPC, JCTC, Professor, Counseling and Career Development Emeritus, and one of 12 University Distinguished Teaching Scholars at Colorado State University. He is the co-founder of the Who You Are Matters board game and virtual experience, and the online storyteller. He recently led the National Science Foundation's Gaussi's Career Program, created a website for those seeking STEM careers, and serves as Chief Advisor to UScience. Mark Franklin is the award-winning practice leader of CareerCycles.com, a career management social enterprise based in Toronto, and co-founder of OneLifeTools.com with Rich Feller. Mark and a team of associates have enriched the career well-being of over 4,000 clients. Mark hosts the Career Buzz show, where he's interviewed hundreds of guests about insights and turning points in their career stories. You can connect with both Mark Franklin and Rich Feller on LinkedIn. For a more detailed understanding of Mark and Rich's work, make sure to check out episode 11 of season 1 and episode 26 of season 2 of Hoda's Career Info. To let me know if you are interested in an opportunity to talk about your work, you can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media for more career info. I am your host, Hoda, and until next time, stay inspired and keep moving forward in constructive ways.